My name's Matthew, and this is Audio Indies, the show for podcasters who put the listening experience first. On this episode, I'm joined by Lauren Shippen. I've known Lauren since about 2015, when she burst onto the fiction podcast scene with her incredible audio drama series, The Bright Sessions. She's since gone on to have a fantastic career in the medium, writing for popular productions like Bridgewater, Marvels, and Surviving Hawkins, a Stranger Things podcast. And that's before we even get to her innovative originals like 2008, Maxine Miles, and Breaker Whiskey. With 11 years under her belt, I was curious whether Lauren felt that the landscape had changed much since she started out. Here's what she had to say.
I think what's interesting is that the art and community of audio fiction, at least in America, I love the way in which the American and UK audio drama communities overlap, but I think that they are distinct, especially because you guys never stopped making audio drama sort of as a society, whereas America kind of abandoned it for about 80 years. But I think that so much of those core elements of what audio drama is and how the community functions, I think has stayed the same. Like, it was really interesting. 2 weeks ago, I went to the Tribeca Festival in New York, and then the first year of a small audio fiction convention called TAFCon in Boulder, Colorado, and got to see a bunch of colleagues that I've known for a decade and also talked to people who've entered the medium in the last couple of years. And what really struck me is that it felt like it was 2016. Like, it kind of had that same feeling. And I'm still hearing shows all the time that are trying new things that are made with massive budgets and made with tiny budgets. And I think that there's that whole range that still exists. I think the thing that's changed so much is everything else, right? Hollywood and the entertainment industry writ large has shifted immensely, and I could expound on that even more. And then also I think the internet has changed so much, especially in these last couple of years, that how audio drama kind of fits into the larger rhythms of our lives and the larger podcasting world, I think has shifted so much, especially with the introduction of video and podcasting becoming this mainstream thing and podcasting becoming synonymous with different things for different groups of people. It's sort of this siloed medium depending on who you're talking to. For some people, it's still serial investigative journalists, these like really well-crafted narratives. For some people, it's two guys in front of a microphone just talking about whatever. And I think that we're in a weird definitional space currently with, I think, trying to figure out where exactly audio drama fits into a entertainment and media landscape that's already deeply fractured.
How have you kind of navigated that? You've been creating fantastic audio for over a decade, and now we're in this era where, every second person is telling you, get on video, put stuff on video, film your show. Like, how have you navigated that as a podcaster and as an audio drama creator?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that, at least for me, the rise of video podcasting happened simultaneously with all of the money in audio drama leaving. And so, I haven't really had anybody be like, you've got to do video for your podcast, because nobody's paying for the audio even, let alone the video. I think I have encountered the, you need to do video for Spotify for marketing. You need to figure out how to make your YouTube video versions of your podcast more engaging, more interesting. But obviously, for audio drama, it's like, are you asking me to make a TV show? I don't really know what that means, other than having captions, sure. I would love to have the luxury of creating really dynamic, interesting captions and things like that for video. But that's not where I'm going to put my time or money. I think for me, it's interesting. I got an email the other day. That was the first time anybody's reached out to me about sort of an AI thing. It was one of these, I don't know if you're familiar with vertical dramas, that kind of whole world of entertainment that's popping up. I don't know if that's kind of become a thing in the UK.
Don't know much about it, no.
So it's the hot new thing that all of the big studios here are starting to pour money into. Basically, they're these 2 to 3 minute episodes that are vertical. So they exist entirely like on TikTok and Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts. And they're essentially like Gen Z soap operas. Like they're meant for like younger audiences, and they're very like dramatic and tropey. And I have some friends who write for them, and it's like, yeah, I think that's great. Like, like I think that's fun. And somebody reached out to me asking, if I'd be interested in having any of the podcast, that Atypical, my studio has made, adapted into vertical dramas, or if I would be interested in writing vertical dramas. My initial instinct was like, I mean, yeah, I like to talk about it. Like, especially writing vertical dramas. Like, I need writing jobs, and I love trying out new mediums and new things to me. But then I looked into the company, and they're like an AI forward company. Like they're writing these vertical dramas and having AI act them out basically. And I, you on the back being like, I know, like I'm not interested in working with an AI company. And I think I feel the same way about that as I do kind of the push to video, where it's like, these companies are just wrong. Like they're just betting on the wrong horse. I don't know if you saw the report yesterday that Netflix video podcasts are performing terribly, but they are. And everybody hates AI. Like even people who use AI hate it. And like, it's the same thing happened 15 years ago at the beginning of the 2010s in sort of the BuzzFeed, Gawker era of internet journalism and all of this kind of stuff, all these blogs, these new media companies, where Facebook and all these other social media companies were pushing pivot to video. And all that happened was a bunch of people lost their jobs and a bunch of media companies went under. Like nobody succeeded by pivoting to video. It did nothing. And so like, I think that I view it a little bit like that, where it's like, I just need to kind of like mind my own business and do my own thing, because eventually this will all go away, because I think that they're wrong. I don't know if that makes sense as an answer.
No, absolutely. And that resonates with me a lot. That kind of just do your own thing. I feel like that. Just keep your head down. You know what works. You know what you enjoy. Just do that. And it's funny how, the sun still comes up in the morning. You can still just do the stuff you like doing. So
exactly. Has there been a sort of pressure in the UK to have audio drama sort of incorporate video? Because like I know that the BBC is still funding audio drama as far as I can tell, and there still is some kind of infrastructure there that is supporting the medium. So I'm curious how video has fit into that.
Yeah, I mean, embarrassingly, I don't have my finger on the pulse at all, so I'm not sure is the answer. Yeah. Like, I'm just not sure. But I would imagine so. I would imagine there's definitely some sort of pressure. Well, maybe it's not complete visual adaptations, but certainly I'd imagine there is that pressure to like create maybe short form versions of your drama. And again, I'm sure you'd agree. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It would be probably a great opportunity to do it in a different medium. But like you're saying, it would have to be a human first thing, wouldn't it? Rather than just some AI creation. So, yeah, I mean, thinking back to, your origins in audio drama, like the Bright Sessions, it was one of these shows that like, I'm pretty certain you were working away on it for a long time, but it had a moment, didn't it, at one point? I'm not saying like it's petered out by any means, but it really exploded. I mean, were we talking maybe 2016, 2017? Was it as late as that?
Yeah, it started in late 2015, and sort of 2016 to 2018 was kind of like the height of it in many ways.
What did you put that down to? Could you identify any one specific moment, or was it just accumulation of hard work in the right conditions and the right timing?
I think the answer is sort of like yes to all of that. I think, as with anything, it's 99% luck, right? It's like it's creating something and something that resonates with people, so that then when you get lucky, you can kind of like ride the wave. But I think that, so I definitely think the conditions were just right for it. By the time that the show came out, Welcome to Night Vale had been out for a couple of years. Wolf 359 had been out for a year and was gaining traction. And then in 2015, a bunch of shows came out in very quick succession in America. In North America, I should say, because there were some Canadian shows as well. It was The Black Tapes and Limetown and The Message, the GE podcast, and then The Bright Sessions. And so I think all of a sudden, this thing that was like very, very niche started to get a little bit bigger and started to bleed out into actually like kind of what's happening with vertical dramas now, where it's like, yeah, most people haven't heard of these things, but like, people interested in media are starting to write about them and sort of starting to say like, this is kind of the hot new thing, and audiences are finding them, especially like young audiences, right? Like that's oftentimes I think where these things are driven from. And the Bright Sessions tells stories about, a lot of like younger people, like people in their teens and early 20s. And then there were sort of two moments that I can kind of identify as like the, rocket fuel in the sort of like little engine that we were going down the road with. And the first one was Jeffrey Craner of Welcome to Night Vale found the show somehow. I mean, like the Welcome to Night Vale guys, both Jeffrey and Joseph have been wonderful about really engaging with the medium and putting the ladder back down for people to come up. And Jeffrey just tweeted about it. He just like, it was just sort of one tweet being like, I'm enjoying this show. And because of the power of Welcome to Night Vale and the American audio drama space, like a bunch of fans kind of came over from there. And then similarly, Steve Wilson, who now is at Q Code, but who in 2016 worked at Apple Podcasts or was Apple Podcasts. Like he was the guy at Apple Podcasts, then known as iTunes. It was still folded into the iTunes infrastructure. Somehow found the show and reached out to us and was like, we want to do a feature. And so we were like featured in the carousel, up at the top in Apple Podcasts, and for our season 2 finale, which would have been May or June of 2016. And back then, iTunes was like the only game in town. And people actually, the people who were listening to podcasts were looking and paying attention to what Apple was putting forward. And so that also brought a lot of listeners. And then it was that thing of like, okay, now we kind of have like a quorum of people who now can sort of go out and evangelize the show to their friends, and it can kind of grow exponentially from there. So it was just really the good fortune of having like 2 people already established in the medium care enough to point a spotlight on it. And then I think just the increased popularity of podcasts in general, like when I was developing the show and starting the show in 2015, I kind of had to explain to people what a podcast was. Like, not even like I still have to explain what a fiction podcast is a lot in America. But I had to explain what a podcast was because it was still like an incredibly niche form. And then in 2015, Serial came out, the This American Life show. And that was such a cultural juggernaut in America at the time that then people knew what a podcast was. And so like the sort of information gap and education that had to be done for like, listen to this thing also shortened a lot. Like that gap still exists. Again, like I do have to tell people what an audio drama is. But I think it was sort of like all of those factors and environments, and also the fact that like there just weren't a ton of audio dramas yet. And so, it was a much, much thinner field. So if somebody listened to Welcome to Night Vale and listened to Limetown and listened to the Black Tapes, it was like, okay, well, what do I listen to next? Oh, the Bright Sessions. Like we were sort of one of the few shows that was there to listen to. So I think that, it was all of those things combined.
Yeah. Yeah, a couple of, before I get to the growth aspect, you just reminded me of something with that, explaining what a podcast was, and it almost became a meme, didn't it, in shows like the Black Tapes, and, somebody would be interviewed and say this like grizzled old guy, and he's like, it's for my podcast. I'm like, what's a podcast? It's like talk radio on the internet. Like you would never hear that these days, would you? But on the growth thing as well, I mean, that is one thing about the audio drama and audio fiction community is it's always been very good at helping everyone else to grow. I don't necessarily know that you see that in other formats of podcasting. I don't know, it could be, but it's just always been a good medium for kind of word of mouth growth, and every creator has supported every other creator. I know you'll find exceptions to this, but in the main, fans are looking for content and people are always happy to point them to the next thing. But it's a far cry from 10, 15 years ago where at certain points I was like, I think I know all the audio dramas. Like I think I could write them all. Whereas now you couldn't even hope to execute that. So
no, definitely not. Yeah. I mean, that was one of the things that I found so lovely about Tribeca and then TAFCon, this sort of these 2 festivals I went to 2 weeks ago, was that like, it was just a great reminder. And it's interesting too, because I was talking to another person at Tribeca who has been in the sort of nonfiction audio realm for a long time. She's very, very established. And we were sort of just talking about like, how are things going in your world? Like, there's no money. Yeah, things are hard. But she was like, but all the annoying people are gone. And I was like, that's kind of true. Like, yes, you do find exceptions to the people who are, you do find people who are not supportive and who are not kind of team players and but they don't last long in audio drama, right? Because it's like, we don't want that. And it was just like so affirming to sort of see the community and get to be with the community and realize like, oh, I like all of these people and I trust all these people. And I believe that we all understand that we are not in competition with each other. And like these days when I'm looking for an audience, I'm not necessarily like looking to tap into the rest of the audio drama audience. Like there's a huge portion of the audio drama audience that like has never listened to a single one of my shows. And I think seeing like the success of like the Magnus Archives, right? The fact that that got like even bigger than Welcome to Night Vale in some respects. Like obviously I would love everybody who listens to the Magnus Archives to come over and listen to the Bright Sessions or anything else. But to me, it's more about like the thing that we all need to be doing is getting people who've never listened to an audio drama before to listen to our shows. Because then it's like, yeah, it's like once you get into the medium, if you like it, you will then organically go exploring for other shows. And I think that I trust that network. And so it's just about like, we just need to widen the entire pool that we're pulling from, because we're very good at getting each other's listeners to listen to shows if they're passionate audio drama fans, right? There are some people who will just listen to one show and they're not necessarily in love with the medium. They just sort of get attached to a particular thing. So that's been like my mission the last couple of years. And I've yet to crack kind of how to get people from other mediums to jump into this medium as listeners.
How does your day, if it typically looks like anything at all, like how does a day typically look for you in terms of what you're doing if you're maybe working on a big project or an ongoing project?
Yeah, I mean, it looks really different. I mean, yeah, this is part of what I love about like being my own boss and being freelance is the fact that every day looks a little bit different. And I've actually been working from home and freelance since 2015. So like way before the pandemic, I was kind of making my own schedule. And now I'm kind of back to where I was a little bit in 2015, 2016, where I have part-time jobs that I'm filling in kind of the gaps in my schedule and getting rent money. So that's like a part of the rhythm of my days is sort of doing part-time work. But then it's a million different things depending on kind of like what stage I'm at with a particular project. So this week, for instance, like a lot of my week has been taken up by production planning and logistics stuff because I'm starting production on a podcast July 20th, which is in, a little under a month. And it's a very, very big 16 episodes. We're doing an album also. And so it's just like very, very big production. And so, there's a lot of logistics planning for that. But then I'm also like writing a pilot script for a thing that I'm developing with someone. And a huge portion of my time now is doing our Patreon and our Instagram and trying to kind of get people from like one to the other and really building up the Patreon, because over the last couple of years, with all of the money leaving and with, audio drama kind of returning to an indie space and just Hollywood and the internet sort of both collapsing in various ways, I've really come to like believe like, okay, the only way to survive is to own your audience and get audience support. Like, yes, advertising, merchandise, all that kind of stuff is great. Obviously, depending on your show, live events can be like a huge part of how you actually sustain a show. But for us, it's like, okay, like, how do we create a membership program that is like robust and that people want to join and that can sustain the studio? And so that's like, I would say probably 70% of my time now is like trying to crack that nut. And there's a million different things that factor into that. So what that looks like, can really change day to day and week to week.
How you kind of touched on this already, but how do you balance that? Still doing the creative work with the nuts and bolts running of the business? Do you have to feel like you have to separate those at all?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do like to kind of create protected time for the creative work. And so I will try to sort of block out like, okay, I know I need to do these scripts. And so I'm going to block out this time and I'm going to like turn off my Wi-Fi and put my phone on do not disturb. And I'm just going to focus on creative work. Obviously that's like easier to do when it's creative work that I'm being paid for. And then for my for the stuff that I'm doing simply for like the love of the game, I think for me, it's like, it is so necessary for me, just like as a human being, that I just sort of find the little cracks to put that work. And candidly, I'm really going all out this year in terms of like trying to make a creative career work before sort of my runway runs out and I have to look at getting a full-time job and kind of taking a step back from creative stuff and figuring out how that fits into a salaried position and all of that. And so like, I don't have hobbies. I don't really have much of a social life currently outside of like hanging out with my partner. It's like my weekends are mainly working my part-time job and then like doing creative work. Because that's also like what I love doing, right? Like it's a thing that fulfills me. And so like it's often eating into the time that like might otherwise be spent like doing fun life stuff, because for me it is like fun life stuff.
Mm-hmm. You touched on membership. Is that a monetization model that you're putting a lot of work into just now?
Yeah, so I first joined Patreon back on 2016 with the Bright Sessions, and it helped sustain the show and helped me start paying the people, because we were all just doing it for free at first. And yeah, I mean, it really, that and advertising like kept the show going and enabled me to pay everybody. And then when I founded Atypical, we moved to like Memberful for a little bit because Patreon didn't allow for multiple RSS feeds. And so it's like for a studio that has multiple shows, but they introduced multiple RSS feeds last year. And so we got back on Patreon. And I sort of explained that movement because Patreon, I sort of discovered this when we did a Kickstarter last year for a project. There is a huge benefit to being in an ecosystem that people already are familiar with. Like with Memberful, it's sort of like it's owned by Patreon. So it's like the same company ultimately, but it's sort of this white label membership program. So you have it like on your website and it's like people sort of joining your membership versus like a Patreon, people are like pledging to your Patreon. And the amount of just like random people who like donated to our Kickstarter or who have joined our Patreon sort of sight unseen simply because they like the description of what we do and they're already on those platforms giving money to artists, like that has been a boon in a way that I like didn't quite anticipate. So that's my little like advertisement for like Patreon over other things. Like I actually do think brand recognition and somebody's credit card already being in a thing that they already have an account for, like counts for so much. And so I've really, really been aggressively pushing that and like trying a bunch of different things to make the Patreon work. And so it's like I do weekly live streams. I am going to be releasing my first adult novel through Patreon starting in 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks, really. It's a book that I couldn't sell in traditional publishing. And so I'm like, all right, well, I'm just gonna do it on here. And the first 5 chapters will be free to everybody, but then the rest of it, you'll have to subscribe to read. And it's a romance novel. And so my hope is that like, that's such a hot sort of genre right now and something people are like willing to pay for and also like wanting to experience together, especially like a slow burn. So I'm hoping that like that'll drive membership. And then, yeah, like, just kind of creating excitement around shows that already exist for shows that are upcoming, bringing up behind the scenes stuff, offering like just trying to figure out sort of how to offer value and how to build that community. Because if I can get a big enough community on there, plenty of people are completely sustained off of their Patreons. And it's just about, like, okay, a very small portion of your audience is going to pledge actual money to you. And so how do you make your audience big enough where that tiny portion of it is enough to give you a living? And so that's where it kind of feeds back into the like problem of how do we get people who've never heard audio drama before to like get into this medium and be excited about it?
Yeah, I was just looking at my recurring questions there because there is one about money, which I'll ask you soon, but it might be a good time to switch over to those because there's a few ones I'm keen to see your responses to. So starting off with like the first one there is what listener message has stayed with you the longest?
Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch, but I think that despite the fact that I am somebody who has been in fandom since I was a teenager and for whom like art is so incredibly important and life-giving and life-saving, I think I'm still so surprised anytime I receive a message from somebody that is really earnestly expressing the importance of my work in their life. And I think the one that sticks with me the most is a listener, a young listener. I think they were 16 or 17. Emailed me once, and this is like a little bit heavy, so like warning for anybody listening, that their friend called them very much in distress. They were worried that they were going to hurt themselves, and they were kind of reaching out for help. And this listener emailed me and said, I have listened to the Bright Session so much that I just started to repeat some of the lines that I've heard from the show to kind of like talk them down and keep them on the phone while like help got to them. And they sort of attributed listening to the show their ability to handle that situation and to help their friend in that situation. And that was just like really, I mean, humbling and wonderful to hear. And their friend was okay. They got them help. And I think for this listener, it was also very, empowering to be able to help their friend and sort of also to know that you can reach out for help. And so that I think has stuck with me the most, or something I come back to a lot, because I think that, I don't think that art ever has a responsibility to its audience to do a certain thing or tell a certain story or tell a story a certain way. But I do think that, like, as a writer, I have a responsibility to my audience to be thoughtful and to make sure that, like, what I'm putting out there, even when it's dealing with complicated people and with messy subjects, is still thoughtful and compassionate. And ultimately, they're walking away with the encouragement to care for their fellow human being, even if it is like a really dark show or a show that has really morally great characters. So yeah, that one I think about a lot.
Yeah, that's a really powerful bit of feedback. And it's one of those, I guess, that, I don't want to speak for you here, but when you're replying to that sort of thing, I imagine anything you write feels a bit glib, and like it's just a hard thing to kind of, because it's so powerful.
100%. I mean, this is like not to overshare, but I did write an entire series basically about my panic disorder. I actually, like there was a period of time where I was doing a lot of different conventions, like Emerald City Comic Con and PodCon and San Diego Comic Con, all these things. And I had like a wonderful opportunity to sort of meet listeners for the first time. This was sort of at the height of the show. And a lot of people, would sort of share those really personal things in person as well, right? Like they would share a piece of art that they had made, and they would share that the show helped them come out to their parents, or helped them realize something about themselves, or helped them seek help, or help somebody else. And I remember like talking to my therapist about this and being like, I always feel so inadequate in those moments, because this person that I've never met is like bearing their soul to me, and I want to be there with them in that moment. But yeah, anything I possibly say feels glib. And she had a really helpful perspective, which was like, they already have a relationship with you because of your work. You do not have a relationship with them, right? And so it's like, so it is always going to be unbalanced. And like, yeah, all you can do is like listen and be kind and thank them. And like, but there's no way that you are ever going to be able to meet them where they are, because they already have this established relationship with you because of your work. And that just like helped me kind of like give myself a little bit of a break of like, okay, right. Like it up until this person speaking to me either through email or in person, this has been a one-way street. And like, I can't be expected necessarily to like be exactly where they are, but I can at least be there with them in that moment and listen to them. And so to anybody else who's, maybe dealing with that in their creative life, like this is me like giving you a break, like give yourself a break, like just listen and be kind. And that I think can be enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the listener probably doesn't expect Tolstoy as a reply. Like they just want to feel heard and acknowledged. I'm bad, not saying I've had pretty powerful sort of messages and feedback before. And yeah, I'm bad. I'm just like, cheers, mate. That sounds very dismissive, but I don't mean it that way. It's just, I don't really feel, as much as I think of myself as a writer, that these are hard things to reply to, I guess, because they're not fictional. So
Yeah. And I think it's like the thing is that like you've already given them the reply, because it's like, for them, it's like you reached out with a piece of writing that then they absorbed, and this is them responding to you. And so it's like, if anything, it's like they're sort of taking the second step in the conversation, and we've already kind of said our piece in the work itself. And I think that it can be like hard to wrap our heads around that.
do you have any like early life memories of listening to audio fiction, as a kid or whatever?
That's an interesting question. Not early life memories, because I mean, yeah, audio fiction is just not a part of modern American culture in the way that it still is in the UK, right? Like, I mean, I think, my parents were big, NPR, our public radio here, devotees. And so like I grew up listening to a lot of NPR affiliates, and the Moth, the storytelling hour, is something that's like often broadcast on those. And so I think I remember hearing the Moth growing up. But that's not really audio, right? It's more like somebody in front of a microphone kind of telling a story. Sometimes it's fictional, sometimes it's not, sometimes it kind of blends the two. It's like going to like an open mic reading kind of thing. But I do remember, I was a super like cool kid in middle and high school who had tons of friends, and definitely wasn't like at home watching like silent movies. Like I was a total nerd in school, and didn't have much of a social life, and had I have an uncle who's like a big film buff. And when I was maybe like 13, 14, he gave me a list of like all of the movies sort of from like the first half of the 20th century that he thought I should watch. And that included The Third Man, the Orson Welles movie, and then also like Buster Keaton and all of those silent films. And so in sort of freshman and sophomore year of high school, so that's ages like, 14, 15, I got really into kind of like that era of storytelling. And that's when I first heard Orson Welles' War of the Worlds. And so like, that's probably my earliest memory of like listening to an audio drama, is listening to that. And that is like still the reference point for people in America. Like when I explain what audio fiction is, I'm like an old school radio drama, War of the Worlds. And they're like, oh, okay. Even though I think like probably like most Americans at this point, like haven't heard that, they at least like know it. And then, I listened to like The Shadow and like a couple of other radio dramas of that era. But I think the first, sort of audio drama, like modern audio drama I heard was Welcome to Night Vale in 2014 is when I started listening to that. So yeah, it's something that I sought out as a teenager, sort of in doing my deep dive of like early American media. And I like, yeah, it's even just funny to say like early American media is like, yeah, the 20th century for us. Like you guys have, books from like the 1100s, and, we're like, it's like, oh, 1932.
I'm going to ask a really pretentious question. I'm like putting my virtual beret on to ask it, but you talked about silent films there. You've maybe never thought about this, but do you think anything from the silent movie world somehow like has influenced your writing at all? Again, this is very pretentious and wanky, but
no, I love that question, and because I've never been asked it, and I don't know that I've ever thought about it. But my first instinct is yes, I think it has. Yeah, I love Buster Keaton. I love Charlie Chaplin too, but I actually prefer Charlie Chaplin's talkies versus his silent films. But yeah, like I think that there's the thing about silent films, and especially like Buster Keaton in general, like Buster Keaton obviously does have the subtitle cards and things like that for the bits of dialogue, but so much of his storytelling is physical. And like I'm a huge physical comedy fan. Like I love that stuff. And in order to tell a compelling story in that way, rhythm is so important. And I think the same is true for another movie that was on that list that my uncle gave me was His Girl Friday. And like I grew up watching like the Philadelphia Story too. That was like a favorite movie of mine as a child. And it's like those kind of like screwball comedies that are so fast and like rapid, and the dialogue is like chewy. I think that sort of the combination of those two things, like watching all of that when I was an early teen, really affected the way that I think about dialogue and the way that I think about storytelling. Because in audio, like I'm always thinking about silence as much as I am about the dialogue, and specifically the silence of like, or the rhythm of the silence and how that pairs with the dialogue, and when to pause and how long to pause for. And I edit all my own dialogue for the most part for that reason, because like, even though I can't sound design, like I usually know what I want an edit to feel like and sound like. And it's just like more expedient for me to just do it myself because I have a very particular taste when it comes to rhythm. So I do think that in that sense, like silent movies really did influence me, because you get a sense for like tension and rhythm, because that's kind of all you have in a silent film, right? And like in most silent films, you don't even have sound effects, right? You just have a score. And actually, like the score has usually been added after the fact, because it would have been live scoring back when it was actually in theaters. And so it really then becomes about the shots and the visual rhythm and sort of the physical stuff that Buster Keaton is doing on screen. And what is that communicating? How is it communicating the story? How is it communicating emotion and character and all of that kind of stuff? And so I think that that's all percolating in the back of my brain at all times.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Yeah. And yeah, I like what you're saying about conversation and dialogue as well. Is that something that you paid a lot of attention to over the years? Was just like whether it is real life conversations or the dialogue in films or whatever? Did you go quite deep on like how a conversation sounds, almost like the anatomy of a conversation, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is why audio drama is so suited to like my particular sensibilities, and I think why it was like easy for me to kind of slide into, because when I wrote the pilot of the Bright Sessions is the first script that I've ever written. Like I'd written sort of like, you know, short stories and half finished novels as a kid, but like I'd never taken a creative writing course. I'd never taken a film writing course, screenwriting, anything like that. But what I have been doing since I was a child is performing. I was sort of an actor initially. And and this actually leads me to another thing sort of about audio drama. Just to briefly go back to a previous question. In terms of early childhood experiences of hearing audio drama, I didn't listen to audio drama as a kid, but I come from a huge musical theater family. And so I listened to a lot of musical theater. And I also saw a lot of musical theater, but you know, listening to cast albums, like there is some, like you are getting an audio story, especially something like Les Mis, you know, which like we listened to a ton. There's no dialogue in Les Mis. So when you listen to the cast album, you are getting the entire story. And without the visuals, it's still like this very, very rich story. And so I think like that was another factor. But yeah, so in performing, in acting class, in drama class, all of that kind of stuff from sort of age, 13, so much of what you do is cold reading two-person scenes, right? You're handed a script, you're handed a scene partner, and you just go for it. And there's a reason that like the Bright Sessions, when it starts out, is just like two people in a room talking because that thing of just like, okay, it's a scene, it's only a conversation between two people, and it has to be interesting, and feeling the natural rhythm of that, I think is something that I was taught from an actor's perspective, that then when I was writing, I was able to kind of like deconstruct after the fact. Like I would sort of, write an episode of the Bright Sessions and then in editing it be like, oh, like this is why this thing feels right here. And this thing needs to be tweaked because it actually needs to be that, this way for this reason. And then, a lot of the stuff that I watched as a kid, like, those screwball comedies, those fast talking movies from the early part of the 20th century. And then, Gilmore Girls and The West Wing were like hugely formative TV shows as a teenager. And those are both like extremely rapid, very wordy scripts where characters are talking over each other and sort of circling back on conversations, things like that. Like my partner and I were actually talking the other day about Aaron Sorkin and how like Aaron Sorkin loves to do this thing where he will have two characters talking about something and then they go on this like huge sort of sidebar and like, go through a bunch of different topics. And then one of them will like immediately snap back to the subject that they were starting the conversation with. And like, sort of, because he's kind of obsessed with like really intelligent people. And so it's like, okay, this person was able to hold this thing in their head. Were you like, do you remember what we're talking about? And so I think that, like watching all of those shows, and then I come from a very chatty family that talks over each other, and it's a big family. And so, or my extended family is a big family. And so I think that was also like a big piece of it as well.
You said you thought of something else. Was that part of it, or was there another thing
Oh
before I
yeah,
got on
the
you?
musical theater thing was
Yep.
the something else, and just sort of I think understanding too the rhythm of like scene and song and the rhythm of songs and how lyrics function differently than dialogue. I'm a big Stephen Sondheim fan. Like that really is what I was raised on, and he was one of the greatest writers ever in my opinion. And so like I think just sort of being at the school of Sondheim from a young age also taught me a lot about dialogue, even though it's lyrics. Like you're still learning kind of the rhythm of storytelling and sort of the interplay between characters.
I wanted to go back a wee bit to you talked about listening to Welcome to Night Vale, I think, in about 2014. I just
Yeah.
wondered about, like, how did that look? Were you going out on walks? Like, where were you listening and how?
Oh, that's such a great question because I actually have a great answer for this. So, yeah, I've been on Tumblr since forever, and that's how I discovered Welcome to Night Vale, right? Because Tumblr really adopted that show and ran with it, and I was like, oh, what I'm kind of curious about this thing, and I had already been listening to podcasts at that point because I'd interned at WNYC, the NPR affiliate, in college, and sort of had caught up on the show I was working on through podcasts, and so I was listening to like all my favorite NPR shows kind of in podcast form. And I had just booked an acting job that was filming in Angeles National Forest, which was about a 90-minute drive from my apartment. And our call time was like 5 a.m. So it's like I had to, get up at 4 a.m. and sort of like drive through the dark into the woods as the sun was rising, and then be shooting all day and drive back through the woods with the sun was setting. And so that's how I first listened to Welcome to Night Vale, was like driving through dark woods as the sun was either rising or setting, which was like just the perfect environment to be listening to that. And then by the time that the shoot was over, it was only like maybe 3 or 4 days. I had gotten to A Story About You, which is I think like maybe episode 7. I forget exactly, but it's early. It's sort of in the first 15 episodes, and it's a story about you. It's entirely like in second person. And I remember I was doing my laundry while listening to that. And I ended up just sort of sitting down on my bed with like my laundry strewn about me because I just like I was so in rapture that like that was sort of the first time where I was like, I actually can't do anything else because I'm just like I'm so taken by this story. And that's still an episode that I return to a bunch and re-listen to because I just think it's brilliant.
It's funny that, isn't it? How you can kind of put yourself places depending on what you were listening to at the time. And this will be relevant to music or whatever,
Yeah.
audiobooks, audio drama, podcasts. But yeah, sometimes you have these very specific things and it burns it in your mind, doesn't it? Like you're saying, that's such an evocative setting for listening to that. And it must have obviously stirred a lot in you that you went on to create your own as well. I mean, it goes without saying that'll have been a massive influence on you, won't it?
Hugely. Yeah. I mean, by the time that I was, well, I guess, yeah. I mean, I think I wrote the first episode of the Bright Sessions like 2 months after listening to Welcome to Night Vale, because I wrote the first episode and then kind of didn't do anything with it for a year. And then like the following summer in 2015, I wrote the rest of the episodes. But yeah, I mean, like I really wanted to make something of my own, and I thought Welcome to Night Vale was so cool. And I was just like, okay, what can I do that would be just audio? Like what's an idea that could work in just audio? And that's really where the Bright Session started, was from the desire to make something in audio.
Do you have any other like listening experiences that still stick with you to this day?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I remember listening to Limetown, and gosh, it would have been episode, I want to say it was like the end of episode 2 of the first season, but it's this kind of like creepy fake radio show thing. And I was just at my sink doing dishes, and the main character is in her hotel room, kind of like, recapping the day of all this weird stuff that she's discovered about this town that just like disappeared. And all of a sudden someone starts banging on her door and calling her name in this like really kind of like anguished voice. And I jumped, like I almost like broke the thing that was in my hand like, in my sink. And I looked behind me, like towards my front door, because it was so like, I was so in it that for a second I thought that somebody was at my door, even though like the name being called was not my own. So that really stuck with me. And then I mean, like listening to the last season of Wooden Overcoats while doing a jigsaw puzzle with my mom, listening to the finale of Wolf 359 on Christmas and just being like so like distraught. Yeah, I think that there's just a lot of, like you said, like there's just, there are certain things that can kind of pin you in a place and time, and audio drama is definitely one of those things for me.
With your background both in performing and in writing, what do you feel, if anything, is harder to fake in audio than in video or just any visual medium?
Yeah, I think I mean, like there's certain things that like we won't even try to fake in audio, but we'll just do. Like if someone's eating something, like they just have to be eating something on mic. Like there's no way to kind of fake that in a way that sounds convincing. Like an actor can't kind of like, like chew around nothing. It doesn't sound convincing. Um, Same thing with like running. I make actors like pump their arms and like really like make sure that there's movement there. So I think that there's like a bunch of physical things that are hard to fake in audio, but I think that the thing that is hard to fake might not be the right, exactly the right way to say this, but I think that there's a lot less, there's a lot more forgiveness in audio than other things and a lot less in other things, right? Like I think that one of the reasons that horror is so popular in audio drama, I think, is because like it's actually, I think in many ways easier and sort of more convincing for a horror story to be scarier when you can't see anything. Like my favorite horror movie, like what I think is the best horror movie that I've ever seen is the Blair Witch Project. Like I think that movie is brilliant and you never see anything in that movie. There's no monster, right? And I think that is what makes horror and audio so powerful. But it's, a lot harder to do action. It can be a lot harder to do something like romance or like comedy, because both romance and comedy, I think, rely so much on a look between actors or body language, the proximity that they have, physical bits, whatever. And I think in general, for me, the sound design or the sound quality can be kind of like, iffy. Like Lord knows the first season of the Bright Sessions before Misha Stan comes aboard, the audio sounds absolutely terrible because I was in charge. And like even like the writing can be kind of like, maybe needs a little bit of work. If the acting in audio drama is bad, you cannot hide. Like it to me, in like a good TV show, acting is 30 to 50% of what makes a show good. Like a really, really great script can kind of carry a slightly weak actor. A really great actor can carry a slightly weak script. You can tell something like Blair Witch very lo-fi, and still make it very compelling because the actors are in it. And Blair Witch actually like didn't have a script, right? The actors were given prompts and then they were like improvising most of the film. In audio drama, like you just don't have the luxury of, the sound design can be amazing, the score can be gorgeous, like the writing can be the most brilliant script you've ever heard, but the acting is like 70 to 80%, I think, of what the audience is sort of relying on for the story. And so I think that that's like, again, like maybe like can't fake is not the perfect way to put it, but like that's the thing that you cannot sort of hide from. Like you need good performances.
I heard some data a while back, I'm sure it was Sounds Profitable, they were talking about like this idea of audio primes, like audio first listeners, and you had video first listeners, and it was quite interesting. I've obviously not got it in front of me, but it said that people who watched a lot of podcasts or just a lot of video, a lot of them didn't have a problem with AI voices or like people just reading at them and stuff, whereas people who were primarily consuming audio had massive issues with that because they feel that is the emotional connection with the host. And I guess on screen, if it's quite a dry read or that, you can have all sorts of visuals coming up to keep you entertained, camera angles and that, but if you're just going on voice alone, it's not really going to hold a listener's attention if it's dull, is it? So
Exactly, yeah.
I had another wee question that I wanted to ask you, Lauren, and it was about growth tactics. So have you got a favourite growth tactic that doesn't involve video or social media?
Yeah, I mean, I think that cross promos with other shows, it continues to be kind of the best way to get an audience, right? Having the host or writer or lead actor of another show say a little thing about why people should go listen to your show. And then, like that's just like a huge part of how we get listeners is just, doing those swaps. Like feed drops can also be great, but I think that feed drops have sort of become a little bit of like a tiresome thing for listeners, where it's like when a new episode pops up in their feed, they want it to be the show that they've subscribed to. So I do think sort of like pre-roll, mid-roll cross promos are kind of, one of my favorite growth tactics. And then, I mean, I think that a growth tactic that like I didn't quite anticipate, and this is more sort of like growth for both listeners, but also just like the audio drama medium in general, is offering free resources. A typical artist has a production handbook and a scripting and development handbook and a bunch of templates and examples that we offer for free, so that people can use those to start their own audio dramas. And that has driven like a not insignificant amount of like listenership, membership, consulting business. And I mentioned that just to say that like, that to me speaks so much to the way that I like to think about growth in general, which is like, I am not going out there, with my wares, hawking at the street corner, trying to get people to like listen to my thing. I am arriving at a potluck with food saying like, oh, like I'm really excited to try your casserole. Like, here's mine. And like, oh, let me go get you a drink. And like, do you want to sit down? And, like it is always community first, right? Rather than like, sort of marketing first. And so I think that like the resources has kind of been like a favorite growth tactic of mine, because it really speaks to that, right? Of like, I'm showing up, I'm offering something and asking nothing in return. And I mean, people can buy the production handbook, but most people just download it. And like that, is just a great way to ingratiate yourself to people and to make them curious about what you make. And so I like, that's kind of how I like to approach things, I think.
Yeah, I really like that. One other question I had for you, Lauren, was just about quitting. Like, have you ever over the years thought about quitting? And if so, like what pulled you back?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there have been a lot of times where, I'm so burnt out and the math isn't mathing on like, paying my rent and all of that kind of stuff. And I had a real, sort of like come to Jesus moment at the end of last year where I'm really fortunate to have like been able to kind of just like survive off of my savings from previous jobs and then these part-time jobs for the last little while. But sort of looking at my finances at the end of last year, looking at the work that I had coming up this year, which was like nothing, I was like, oh God, like, do I need to start at the top of the year with applying to a bunch of full-time jobs? Like, do I need to take a step back and kind of like reconsider all of this? And this is after we had raised $50,000 on Kickstarter for Phantom Pulse, this show we're about to go into production on. And like, we're still quite a bit short on what we need to actually make the production happen. The thing that pulled me back sort of from the edge of that was actually really grappling with like, okay, let's play out the tape of that. Like, you go home for Christmas, you have the holidays, you sort of put it aside for a little bit, you come back home at the top of the year and you start looking for jobs, and, you get this job, and this is, how the rhythm of your life changes. And that was just like so truly terrifying to me as a concept. And it's like, it's something that it's a future that I still know that I'm, potentially stepping into. But I decided to just sort of like, all right, I'm going to spend all of the rest of my savings this year. I'm going to spend all the rest of Atypical's money this year that we've kind of had on hand for various productions and things like that. And if by the end of the year, I've not figured out a way to sustain us, then it's like, then I will have to reevaluate and sort of figure out what's next. But like the thing that made me not want to quit is just the realization of like, oh, this is the thing that gives me the most joy in life. And like, this is the reason that I get up in the morning. And I'm going to fight like hell to keep that until I can't anymore. And so I think that that's like, I keep doing this because like I have to. And like, even if I, do end up sort of like slowing down and getting a grown-up job and then becoming a more responsible adult, like I will still do this because I just like, I have to live. And so I think that that's, I think of advice. So my, uncle and a different uncle from the film Uncle. I've had a lot of wonderful uncles who've fostered my artistic inclinations. My uncle and his husband are both in the world of like musical theater and opera, and have had like, my uncle's a conductor and his husband's a musical director. And growing up around that and seeing their careers was always so encouraging and so wonderful and inspirational. And they always said to me, in sort of when I would express wanting to be an actor or wanting to go in a creative career, they said, if there's anything else in life that you could do that would make you as happy, do that instead. And it's like, that is the advice that I give to any young person entering a creative career, where it's like, if there's any doubt, if there's anything else you could do that would make you just as content, do that. Because like, you should only do this if you're insane. Like, because the chances of you succeeding are so slim. And I've had so much success. I've been really fortunate. I've gotten really lucky, and I'm still really struggling. And so it's like, I think that that's just something I keep telling myself, and the advice I keep coming back to is like, well, there's not anything else that would make me just as happy. And so like, until I literally have to, I'm going to, burn this candle right to the very end.
Well, thanks so much for your time today, Lauren. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. And is there anywhere you'd like to send the listeners so they could check out everything that you do?
Yeah, so I will sort of, shill my Patreon, especially because one of the things I really love about Patreon now is that you can sign up for free. So like, I highly encourage people to become free members of our Patreon. You can just go to patreon.com/atypicalartist. You can go to atypicalartist.co/support. You can listen to any of our podcasts on any podcast app, but by joining for free, you can kind of keep up with what we're up to. You can get free content. I think that can be like the best way to kind of like, enter into the Atypical universe. And then in terms of what's next, we're starting to release this queer Western romance novel starting on July 6th. And then later this year, we will be, something will be coming, but then next year, Phantom Pulse, which is an audio drama about a 90s rock band that can exorcise ghosts with their music, will be coming out sometime next year. There may be something related to that comes out sooner. So like, again, like sign up for free for the Patreon. It's kind of like basically the equivalent of like our newsletter, and it's the best way to keep in touch.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Audio Indies. Please make sure you're following or subscribe to the show on your listening app of choice. And if you like what you've heard on this episode, why not share it with someone else who might enjoy it too? Thanks again, and we'll chat next time.